Now let's try editing it with a button. First, we'll add the button. We'll put it at the beginning. It'll be a button with a class of edit and a class of button. And it'll have a child that is an I with a class of FA and a class of FA. What makes for a good edit icon? Let's just search here for edit on Font Awesome. Oh, it's got a bunch of pencils and stuff. FA pencil looks like a good one. Let's do it. Let's expand that. There we go. Oh, now we don't have room, do we? In our CSS, we specified the width of the student name as 100% of its container minus 195 pixels, just enough room for the padding and these buttons. Let's change that to about 255. Refresh. Now it fits again. Let's look at this. Yeah, that's about right. I approve. All right, so now we've got an edit button. What do we want to make it do? Well, I'm going to take content editable true out of here so that it's not editable right off the bat. If you refresh the page right now, you'll see we get an error. Cannot read property add event listener of null on line 90. Add event listener of null, query selector returned null, because now we don't have any content editable elements. So I'm going to comment these out. And let's add a different one. This time, we're looking for a button with a class of edit. And this time, we're going to add an event listener for the click event. And now we'll make an edit function. And what shall we pass in? Let's pass in the student again. I'll bind it to this, pass in the student. And what we really need is that student name span, right? We don't particularly need anything else. So how about we pass that right in here with li.querySelector .student name. Because that's going to be a lot easier than taking the button, finding the li, and then searching inside the li for that span. Let's just pass it in as an argument. So edit is going to take the student. It's going to take the student name field. Let's call it name field. And it's going to take the event last. Remember, the event goes last. Okay. So what we do here is going to depend on whether it's currently editable. Bind of undefined, line 90. I didn't save this. Let's refresh. Let's find one of these LIs. Student name. There's a student name div. So now that's $0. $0. Let's look for content editable. Okay, there's content editable. The value of that is inherit. That's the default, by the way. If you don't specify true or false, it will just inherit it from its parent. But I also saw is content editable, which will always return a Boolean, true or false. So we can check that. So if name field dot is content editable, then we want to make it not editable anymore, right? So name field content editable equals false. Not is content editable. That's read only. That's just going to return true or false. If we want to change the value, we set the content editable property. Else, we want to make it true. Name field dot content editable equals true. Now, if that's all we were going to do, we could just say name field dot content editable equals the opposite of name field dot is content editable. Do the same thing, but we're going to do more inside the if than just that, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it this way, but let's check that out. Refresh. Try putting my cursor in here. It doesn't work. Not editable yet. If I hit edit, then it is. If I hit edit again, it's not anymore. Now notice my hover effect is still there. That's because now it actually has the content editable attribute set to false. So in the CSS, I could tweak this just slightly and say not just content editable, but content editable equal true. And sure, we could do that here too. Edit, there it is. Not edit, there it isn't. Very good. Step in the right direction. Still doesn't save anything. So to do that, we need to do something very similar to what we did before. And if it is editable, and we're changing it to uneditable, we'll say student.name equals name field dot text content. And don't forget this dot save. Now, I've never pointed this out explicitly before, but why does this work, setting student.name? That updates the one in the array. We've taken advantage of this before, but why does it update the one in the array? We didn't mess with the array here, but it does work. Let's try it. Put our last name back in there. Stop editing. It's there. Why does that work? The answer is that objects in JavaScript are always passed by reference, not by value. Primitive types like numbers and strings are passed by value, but objects, which includes arrays, are always passed by reference. So this is not just a copy of the student that's in the array, it's the same one. So that's why that works. This obviously has some side effects, and sometimes you really don't want this. So we will, once we get into React, go out of our way to make copies of objects before we start messing with them. But in this case, it's exactly what we want. So that works very well. So hey, it's working. I'm not quite satisfied because how do you know that this button is going to save? Also, how do I know that it does anything? When I click it, nothing actually happens until I click over here. So how about we focus that thing when we click the edit button? Okay, so if it's not already editable, then we hit our else. We want to set it to true, and then we want to focus it. So name field, predictably enough, there is a function called focus. Refresh, hit edit. Yep, now my cursor's in there. Much better. Yeah, and also you don't know that you need to click this again to stop editing. So let's make it look like a save button after we've done that. So we're going to need the button. That's easy to get. That is the target of the event, right? btn equals event.target. Let's double check that. Console log button. Refresh. Clicky, clicky. btn is not defined. It's because I didn't say const. Click. What? It's the icon. What gives? I've been lying to you about event.target. Well, I've just been omitting the full truth. So we said that the event target is the thing on which the event occurred. The event was a click, so it's the thing I clicked on, not necessarily the thing I attached the event listener to. Because clicking on the icon is adequate to trigger the event listener on its parent, because these events propagate to their parents unless we go out of our way to stop propagation, which you can do just like preventing default. Stop propagation is another function on an event. But if you want to make sure that inside your event handler you have the thing that is really the reason this fired, instead of target, you use current target. So most of the time, that's what you actually want. Because if you click on something that's inside another thing, clicking on that may give you the wrong event target. So let's try that. Let me be careful to click right on the icon, and I still get my button. So in this case, it's important that I use current target. So there, I have the button, but I kind of want the icon too, because I'm going to mess with that. So let's save it somewhere else. And let's just look inside the button with query selector. Look for an I with an FA class. That should be adequate. Now what do I want to do? When it becomes editable, let's change it. Let's say the icon class list. Let's add success. I'm sorry, that's the button, right? To make it green. And then we'll want to remove that after it changes back. btn class list dot remove success. I suppose I can do this after I do these two things. Refresh. Yay, it turns green. Yay, it turns back. But I also want to change that pencil to a check mark. Looking in Font Awesome. Tons of check marks. FA check is good enough for me. So let's also say icon class list. Let's remove pencil and add, I'm sorry, that would be FA pencil. FA check. And let's do the opposite when we cease to be editable. So we'll remove FA check and add FA pencil. Refresh. Yeah. Now I know that saves. Yeah. I like it. Edit with a button. There are other ways you could have done this too. You could have added a button that when you clicked it, popped up a prompt for you to edit, put in the new name. You could have shown and hidden an actual form that had a submit handler. A number of ways you could have done this, and there are pros and cons to each. But content editable is a very useful thing to know about, so here's a couple of different approaches that use that.